This is the Cubs-related podcast presented by CubsInsider.com. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan, and we are coming to you just mere moments after the Cubs take the rubber match against the Washington Nationals on Sunday Night Baseball to get back to their series-winning ways, Brendan. And because we're only a few minutes after this happening, I just want to give a quick round of applause to Steve Cishek for holding down that game. He was out there an awfully long time. I think Buster Olney said during the broadcast that it was a career-high outing, at least since like 2012 for Steve Cishek. So credit to him, because that was a big effort for him to lock down this game. He goes 2 1/3, allowing just one hit to get his fourth save of the year, and it was necessary. So
very
kudos,
playoff-esque.
Steve. Yes, thank you, Steve, for locking that down. But we will break down these 3 games with the Washington Nationals, and then we will get you ready for a 4-game set with the Philadelphia Phillies, led by Bryce Harper, who was a Cubs storyline all offseason, and, of course, number 49. Well, he was 49 on the Cubs. I honestly don't know what he is. But the bearded one, Jake Arrieta.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he's 49 to us. So a very storyline-driven series coming up at Wrigley Field. But let's jump into these games with the Nationals real quick. And boy, Friday night was a fun one. That was one of those games that I think towards the end of the year we will remember, this Friday game against the Washington Nationals. And we will remember it because Kris Bryant goes 4 for 6 with 5 RBIs, including 3 home runs. He homers in the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th consecutively to pace the Cubs, who score 14 runs, winning this one 14-6 on the strength of 6 home runs on the evening. They come from Kris Bryant, Wilson Contreras, Albert Almora Jr., and Kyle Schwarber. And we will talk more about Kris Bryant and Kyle Schwarber after I finish the recaps. But in this one, the Kyle Schwarber home run, he hits a homer, oppo, on the 13th pitch of the at-bat. This was an amazing at-bat from Kyle Schwarber, fouling a bunch of balls off, staying alive, and eventually getting the pitch he was able to do damage with. And it was a big play in the game. Let me take you through this one real quick. The Cubs getting their runs: Javi Baez, an RBI double in the first. Albert Almora Jr. taking Max Scherzer deep on an 0-2 pitch, Brendan, for his 4th homer of the year. That made it 3-0 Cubs in the top of the second. Rendon got the Nationals on the board 3-2 with his 7th homer of the year. In the 7th, it was 3-2 going into the 7th, and then the Kris Bryant show took over. He hits his 9th homer in the 7th. That made it 5-2. Washington would get it to within 5-4, headed into the top of the 8th. The Nationals mere inches, Brendan, from getting back in this one. Carl came into this one, and I got to tell you guys, he was doing almost everything in his power to get the Nationals to tie this game. But they only push across the 2 in this inning, and it is 5-4 Cubs. So it was dicey there in the bottom of the 7th, but they survive. And then in the top of the 8th, the aforementioned Kyle Schwarber home run, his 6th of the year on that 13th pitch. Incredible at bat from Kyle. Kris Bryant comes up again. He hits his 10th home run. That made it 8-4, and a Mark Zagunis single brought in 2 more. That made it 10-4. In the top of the 9th, guess who? It's Kris Bryant for his 11th homer of the season. That made it 12-4. And Wilson Contreras with his 11th home run of the season. That made it 14-4. Washington would add 2 more in the bottom of the 9th, but that would be all that she wrote. Cole Hamels picking up the win in this one. He goes 5 flat, 7 hits, 2 earned, 3 walks, and 5 strikeouts. He is 4-0 on the season. Again, we will circle back to this game, certainly, as this was a very fun one. But if you were looking for that, not only am I back, but this is my statement game from Kris Bryant, it happened on Friday, May 17th. We will remember that one. On Saturday, not so fun, especially for those of us who are the leaders of the John Lester fan club. And this was a start that I think we were all expecting at some point. John just didn't have it on Saturday. He goes 4 1/3, 10 hits, 5 earned, 1 walk, and 3 strikeouts. His ERA rises almost a full run to 2.09. I hate it, Brendan, but just wasn't his day. He had been unbelievable, literally, and the last time he started qualified to be the MLB's ERA leader. So I think we're going to allow him a clunker every
It's
now and
only
again.
one, Corey, only one.
Yeah, so as much as it hurts me that he's not at the top of the ERA leaderboard anymore, it's certainly fine. And John took to Twitter in typical fashion just to say, not good. I need to be better than that. They were all over me, but we get back at it and we'll be better next time. And you go get them, John.
I love it. Yep.
Yeah. So, that's really kind of the story of this one. Dozier homered to give the Nationals a 1-0 lead in the second. The Nationals would add 3 runs in the bottom of the third on a Howie Kendrick double and a Juan Soto double. That made it 4-0, and the only thing of note for the Cubs in this one, David Bote hits his 4th homer of the year in the top of the 6th, but that would be all that she wrote. Steven Strasburg was really good in this game, and Brendan, we noted coming into this series, having to face Castillo, who's near the top of the ERA leaderboard for the Reds, and Scherzer, Strasburg on 3 consecutive days. They had a chance to win more than one, but especially just looking at it with Scherzer and Strasburg, I think you're more than fine taking one of the 2, and then the game plan was go into Sunday night and win the last one against Hellickson, and the Cubs managed to do just that. Hellickson was all over the place. Cubs weren't able to do I think enough. They were able to do enough damage by the end of the game, but it certainly felt like they were leaving, some dangerous runs on the board that they might need later. But it all worked out. But they get their runs in this one on a Javi force out that made it 1-0 in the first. A Schwarber sac fly, his first of 2 sac flies on the evening, that made it 2-0. Anthony Rizzo with his 11th homer of the year. If we were, doing like on Sesame Street, the count, I think 11 would be the number of the day here, as a few Cubs have 11 home runs at the moment. In the fourth, that was Kyle Schwarber's 2nd sacrifice fly of the evening. That made it 4-0. The Nationals would get 1 on a Dozier groundout, 4-1. In the top of the 6th, Kyle Hendricks hit a sacrifice bunt that brought in Jason Hayward on Sunday Night Baseball. Brendan, have we ever seen a Cubs pitcher bring in Jason Hayward on a squeeze bunt on Sunday Night Baseball? I'm trying to oh, that's right. John Lester walked off the Seattle Mariners on such a play.
With his high socks and everything, Corey.
Yes, that was one of the most fun evenings I have ever had at Wrigley Field.
Is that one of your most memorable games you've ever been to?
It's got to be up there.
Right?
Yeah, I've told this story before, but I went to see Chance at the Metro, which is just a block or so away from Wrigley Field, right after. And so, given that is the Brian Maddis game where they start down, I believe 6-0.
Yeah.
And the way that they came back, especially in 2016, that was one of those games where you were like, okay, this team is definitely special.
It's
if there was any doubt before,
Yeah,
and obviously to see John Lester walk off on a squeeze bunt. I love a good squeeze, but now we're talking walk-off squeeze. Sign me up for that. So anyway, Kris Bryant would single in the top of the 6th to make it 6-1. Anthony Rendon with a big homer in this one off of Kyle Hendricks, who just kind of fell off the rails in the middle of this game. That made it 6-4. Howie Kendrick would homer off of Brandon Kintzler in the bottom of the 7th to make it 6-5. But then they brought in Steve Cishek, and that was all that she wrote. The Cubs winning this one 6-5. Hendricks picking up the win to go to 4-4. His final line, 5 2/3, 6 hits, 4 earned, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts. Again, he picks up his 4th win of the season. Steve Cishek, again, 2 1/3 to get the save. He allows just 1 hit, no walks, and he strikes out 2. So a brilliant job from Steve Cishek here. And that is all that she wrote in this series. Again, the Cubs getting back to their winning ways. That series loss to the Reds was their first since that first visit to Miller Park in early April. And they get right back on the horse to pick up the series win and have a 3-3 road trip, which I think is totally fine given the slate of pitchers. When you have to go up against Castillo, Scherzer, and Strasburg, I think if you can get a split on that trip, I think it's totally fine. And to be frank, the Cubs could have won at least one or two more of these games. So I think overall a good showing from this team and getting them set up to return back to Wrigley Field here. But Brendan, the first topic of the night is Kris Bryant. This was the game on Friday night. I actually went back and listened to some of our early podcasts where, I literally said, you'll get me to bet against Kris Bryant over my dead body. That was I think after that Texas or Atlanta series, I said that. And, we have certainly seen him not only get back to form, but as we talked about, he's putting up numbers that would be his career best. This is almost a different level for Kris Bryant. And I think if not for Cody Bellinger playing on literally another universe now, I think the Cubs would have at least a couple legitimate MVP candidates, but unfortunately nobody is in the same conversation as Cody Bellinger right now. So we're going to need him to come down to earth a little bit, though it'll make it that much more satisfying when the Dodgers fail in the playoffs, that they'll waste that season from Bellinger. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Anyway, this was the game that it's not, Kris Bryant is back at MVP level and all this other. This was that statement game. Not only am I back,
forget about
everybody,
me. Yeah.
but you better take notice of what I'm doing. And this game was so indicative, Brendan, of the difference between, when KB is right, and obviously he hits 3 home runs, but just in terms of those early season struggles, and we talked about this, we were totally confident that he was healthy, but he just didn't look right. He didn't look like himself. He was lunging at balls. He was swinging through, lower velocity. It just didn't seem right. And, it was obviously just a matter of getting more comfortable. He's obviously had great results with that axe handle bat that he switched to. But this is what it should look like, Brendan. If you make a mistake to Kris Bryant, you deserve to pay for it and pay for it loudly. And this is what we saw on Friday. This is, hey, everybody, I'm not good. I am one of the best players in baseball. And I read all of those tweets in the @Cubs mentions and on Instagram and stuff like that. And some of the people out in the Cubsverse better put respect on my name when they start talking about one Christopher Lee Bryant. And this game on Friday, Brendan, boy, was that fun to watch. 3 home runs. This was awesome. And there was a stat. I will try to find the author of the stat, as I like to give credit on those. But pointing out that the Cubs have had 3 players have multiple 3-homer games before the age of 28. And it is Sarah Slangs on Sports.
Hold on, can I guess this?
Yeah, so Cubs with multiple 3-homer games before turning 28 since 1908.
Okay, so Sammy Sosa, right?
No.
What? Not Sammy?
No.
Okay. Aramis Ramirez?
Yes.
Okay. So 2 other ones in addition to KB or with
Kris
KB?
is one of the 3.
So I got one more. Before 28.
Yes.
Since 19... I don't know, Ernie Banks?
Yes. Look at you.
All right. How is Sammy Sosa not one of those guys? Gosh, that's weird to me.
I don't know. Well, how old was he when he came over to the Cubs?
I don't know, 24, 25? That was before my time.
I don't remember. You and I were both kind of toddlers. So, yeah, I would be lying if I said I was super up on that. But yes, so the 3 Cubs with multiple 3-homer games before turning 28 since 1908. Kris Bryant, Aramis Ramirez, and Ernie Banks. That is wonderful company.
That's good company to be with.
Yeah, wonderful company to keep for Kris. There are some absolute legends on that left side of the Cubs infield. But yeah, Brendan, this was an amazing game to watch. And again, I think that game that there shouldn't have been any doubt that he was back and playing at the level we've all come to expect him to. But this is the type of game that gets into that national conversation. and should remind anyone that was still on the fence about this, like, yo, you need to take notice what this guy is doing. He's got his overall numbers after this weekend: 272, 402 on base percentage, a 562 slugging percentage, 406 WOBA, 156 WRC plus.
Let's go.
Those are big time numbers, folks,
MVP
and both
numbers.
of those all career highs. So, guys, this was the Kris Bryant game. This was the game that we've been dreaming of, that we've been pleading with people to, not speak ill of him and worry about him, because this was coming, and here it is, Brendan.
Was there ever a doubt? I don't think there really was from the majority of Cubs fans.
No,
there's a few
I don't
that
think so.
here or there. But when someone like Jeff Passan says, "Oh, everyone in Chicago is doubting him,"
hated that.
Come on. Yeah, come on.
Jeff tweeted out the other day, after the 3-homer game, remember when it seemed like the entirety of Chicago was worried that Kris Bryant's power was gone.
Yeah.
And I tweeted out on my Twitter, like, I hate tweets like this, because it makes it's like, let me tweet this out to all my followers. He's an ESPN, like, national writer, to make the Cubs fan base seem dumb. And
we're smarter than that. Come on.
Well, and just in our purview, like, I know for a fact that was never something that was the opinion of this podcast, that was the opinion of CubsInsider.com, of BleacherNation.com, of Sahadev and Patrick at The Athletic. And I'm not paying attention to everything, but I'm sure there are a lot of other blogs and good Cubs coverage that fall into that category that never doubted Kris Bryant and never thought that his power was gone.
That was ridiculous.
Let's not paint in broad strokes here. Like, a lot of us knew better than to think that was the case.
And a lot of us were saying, even before he broke out, like, hey, look, Kris Bryant is doing some really interesting things. Like, his walk rate is at a career best despite the overall numbers not being there. And looking a little bit closer, like in 2016, he would swing at 3 of 10 pitches outside the zone. And for a while there, he was swinging at like 2 pitches of 10 pitches outside the zone, which seems marginal, but that's a big difference in the grand scheme of things. So for him to come back and put up numbers which are, at this point in the year, better than they were in 2016 is wild to me. So I want to read you Kris's stat line through his first 199 plate appearances, because that's where he is right now. And I want to compare that to his 2016 pace as well. So right now, like Corey was saying, he's batting 272. He has a 402 OBP. He has 11 home runs, and his WOBA is 406, okay? Now, in 2016, when the Cubs, if I need to remind you, won the World Series and Kris Bryant won the MVP, through 199 plate appearances, he was batting 273. His OBP was 357. His WOBA was 362, and he had 9 home runs. Great stat line. His walk rate was 10%. His strikeout rate was 19.6%. So kind of what you want from your top-tier hitter. Going back to this year, this is why his numbers are even more mind-blowing, because he's walking at a 15.1% rate. He's only striking out at a 17% clip. He's making above league average contact. So what I'm saying is he's hitting the ball further than most people. He's swinging at fewer pitches than most hitters, and he's making more contact than most batters. That is a recipe for success, Corey. And so this current iteration of Kris Bryant might be the best version of Kris Bryant. Like, he may be reaching his ceiling, so to speak, even though he wasn't that far off. So that should not go unnoticed. Yeah, he's playing well. Yeah, he may be, quote unquote back, even though he was never gone. But this is better than what we've seen from Kris Bryant, and that is insane, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes along with just a lethal middle of the order that the Cubs have going for them right now. And we'll get into it more throughout this podcast, that they've got some positional stuff to work out, and you're kind of always going to have other positions where you're trying to figure out who should be getting the most playing time and where guys should be. Second base is certainly that spot for the Cubs right now. But when you look at what that middle of the order is doing, if you're able to keep that intact and have that going, you can figure out, what to do around it.
But, and then someone's going to pop out of nowhere, too, at that point. Yeah.
But just to have, and in case I need to clarify this, the middle of the order, the four consists of Kris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, and Wilson Contreras, who, for whatever reason, Brendan, and this is why I said that this is the number of the day, all four of them now have 11 home runs on the season. So
that's good.
I don't know if any of you are listening to this in Vegas right now. You want to like play roulette or something like that. Like go for 11. I like that's the number right now. And of that group, like Rizzo is the only one that isn't in the top. I'm looking at this right now, 13 in terms of all MLB position player WAR. Wilson Contreras is at 13. Kris Bryant is at 10 and Javi is at 6. So, you've got three guys right now in the middle of the Cubs order who are performing at near top of the league, like literally top 10 in baseball levels. So that's got to get you excited. We've talked about those guys a lot, and I don't know that there's anything like new particularly to add on, someone like Wilson or even Rizzo. Like Rizzo is just kind of Rizzo, right? But it's just got to get you rather pumped up to see what this offense is doing, because it's just a little more spread out than some of these other things. Like I don't know where the Dodgers would be right now if Cody Bellinger wasn't doing this. And they don't have that many top guys in even the top 20. Right. So to see these names for the Cubs be up there, it's a rather fun trend to discuss. But I think that's all there really is to say on Kris Bryant. Like at this point, if you need any further clarification or proof that he is, again, not good, but like literally one of the best players in baseball, I'm not sure what more you want him to do. And maybe he'll hit 4 home runs in a game coming up soon. It wouldn't surprise me. Like I think we're at that point where we can start expecting him to start bouncing balls off the video board at Wrigley. Like we're back to K-Boom, right? Like that's where we are. But I wanted to, especially because you wrote a piece about it on CubsInsider.com, and he has a good series in Washington here. But I like Schwarbs in the leadoff spot, and I was
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how I felt about it necessarily. I always believed in his on base ability and how that worked in the leadoff spot. I'm sure if you go back in the logs of this podcast, I was very in favor of him starting that 2017 season as the leadoff hitter, and that didn't go very well. But so I've always believed in that. But I was just sort of on the fence about it, I guess. But
I get it, yeah.
He's, that eye and that ability to get on base, it looks good. And he has looked better, I think, as this season has gone on. And, despite kind of trying to make some adjustments himself and figure things out up there, his overall line is pretty good. It's just under league average, really, with some of these numbers. And, that's with some struggles in there. So I think once he works out of those, I think he's in for a very productive season. But I know you dug into those numbers a bit more than I did.
I like Schwarber in the leadoff spot. We talked about this on the last episode. But long term, I'm not like pumping the idea with both my fists. I just like it for what it is right now. And the reason is, and what I wrote about on Cubs Insider was, one, currently in his last 50 plate appearances, he's seeing the ball better than he ever has, and he's making more contact than he ever has. And at least, again, in these last 50 plate appearances, now the power is starting to come out. And so if you look at Schwarber's hard hit rate over those 50 plate appearances, it's better than most of the league. And if you go back even in his last 100 plate appearances, it's still better than most of the league. But the issue was he was not getting those hard hit batted balls to fall for hits for whatever reason. You can call it luck, you can call it randomness, whatever reason it was happening. So I like the idea. I think I like it more just because Descalso is not playing so well, and because Zobrist, you don't know if he'll ever be back. So for the current, iteration of this offense, I like giving Schwarber a chance. What I don't like about it is he'll be batting with more men off base, so he has more opportunities to get screwed by the defensive shifts, which I don't like. But overall, there was like an 80-point discrepancy between his expected run creation and his actual run creation. So there was reason to believe that going forward, if he kept playing like this, we would eventually see the results. And we're seeing that. That 13-pitch plate appearance was a microcosm of really what he's been doing for the last month or so. Seeing pitches, making contact, going and grinding through at-bats, and then hitting the ball far. And that's ultimately what you want to see. So, again, right now, leadoff, I'm into the idea, but come August, come September, you hope that you can maximize Schwarber's value, that power number, that OBP, after someone like Wilson Contreras. You hope he takes over that type of role, and then someone like Descalso or Zobrist can come back and take over that leadoff spot.
And again, I do want to just take a second to draw attention to that 13-pitch at bat again.
That was insane.
Awesome. And looking at the zone for the at bat,
it was right in the same location.
Yeah, I don't remember who the pitcher was. I don't think
Bearclaw?
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah,
but I don't think anybody cares who the Nationals reliever it was, honestly. But, you're looking at these 13 pitches, and I'm looking at the graph from game day. Pitch number 2, pitch number 6, and pitch number 12 were balls that were, pretty far outside near the other batter's box. And maybe pitch 9 was a foul that was kind of in a similar location. But basically everything else is pounding that low outside portion of the plate, that bottom left corner zone, if you're, kind of thinking it from the catcher's perspective with Schwarber batting left-handed. And for Kyle to just stay on that pitch, keep fouling it off, stay alive, and eventually, you just see the same pitch so much that you're able to figure out how to get on it and go oppo with it. It was just such an incredible at-bat, and to be able to do that, this was, again, that inning is like minutes after the Nationals come very close to tying this game, with Carl throwing some wild pitches there, and, the Cubs kind of getting lucky with one of those bounces, but this was just such an incredible at-bat and a huge, as Pat Hughes would say, this wasn't one of those where Pat Hughes would call it beforehand because, the bases weren't loaded or something like that. But afterward, you're like, this is a real turning point in this game. The Nationals have made this a one-run game, and you come right back out and get the 2-run homer there, extend the lead. Then obviously Kris Bryant, starts doing his thing and going, absolutely wild at the end of this game, and they end up winning by 8 runs. But this was that moment in that game that really I think altered the course of this game. So this was an incredible at bat, and I do think indicative of one of the reasons that you like Schwarber up there is that he can put together at bats like that. He can see pitches, he can foul pitches off, and he's got a good eye. Yeah. So when you try to beat a guy in the same spot, Schwarber's a tough guy to do that with. We've seen him struggle with different types of pitching and off-speed stuff in particular, but he's a tough guy to get out if you're going to throw him the same pitch in the same location over and over again. I would trust him to eventually straighten one out and figure it out. So that was a really incredible at bat by him. So just wanted to make sure that we were drawing the proper attention there. The next thing I want to talk about, Brendan, is the second base position, because I think that is where, at least on offense, you're the most unsure of what the Cubs should be doing, or even what they're going to do on a daily basis. And I think that part of that discussion revolves, Hayward has been in a bad slump. We talked about that the last time.
Looked better in that last game, though.
Yeah,
so at least that was an encouraging sign.
Yeah, and again, he's still, some of these balls are hit hard. He doesn't look as good as he did in that stretch in the beginning of the year. But he's going to play. We've done this song and dance plenty to know that it's going to take a real slump, for an extended period of time from him to change his playing time. And with his defense, his base running, he's going to be out there. Almora's hot right now, And, this is, I guess, a good opportunity to just do a small aside there. He's really had a nice stretch here, and I do want to give him credit for that. Again, I have railed against the idea of him being the leadoff hitter, and I still don't like it. But I've said time and time again, I like him getting that playing time. I like him deeper in that order, and if he can get hot, we've seen what he can do, when he gets on one of these little hot streaks. And, to see him take an 0-2 pitch that was not a bad pitch from Scherzer in the game on Friday and take him deep and give the Cubs a big home run. He's in a nice way here, and I think that's really good to see. And he also has a penchant, Brendan, for taking some of the top pitchers in the league deep. Of course, he took Kershaw deep in one of those playoff games. Like, he's got a thing
Game
for
1, the NLCS. Yep.
Yeah, he's got a thing for taking like some of the leagues. He doesn't hit many home runs, but when he hits them, he makes them count.
Off Cy Young winners, apparently.
Yeah. For sure. So I did want to at least give him credit for the little run that he's on right now. But, with him playing well, he's going to be out there, especially against left-handers. And they're trying to increase his playing time and his adjustments against right-handers. So you've got those two. Schwarber's trending better. He's getting these opportunities at leadoff, so he's going to be out there. So that really kind of leaves only one position where you're going to be flexing some of these guys around. And now, granted, those outfielders aren't going to play every day. You can move KB out there, of course, right? We see this happen all the time. But that second base position is kind of the center point, the focal point of where these changes come from. And I think right now the issue is that Daniel Descalso has not been good for, unfortunately, a pretty lengthy period of time here. He started the season really well, was kind of showing, that last season he had where he kind of had an improvement in his numbers, changed some things about his swing, was, maybe the new him. But unfortunately, now you look at his overall numbers, we're at 120 plate appearances here through Sunday night. He's got a .215 batting average, just a .286 on base percentage, .318 slugging, good for a 64 WRC plus, which again, 100 is league average. 64 is not good, folks. So, that's a bit of a problem. And I think of the second base contenders, he's clearly the worst defender. That's, not even really close, I don't think, with the other options. So that's a bit of a problem, right? Then you look at David Bote, who has also just found himself in a wretched slump, Brendan. And unfortunately, for as much as we liked his defense, especially when he came up last year, he's been a little sloppy out there.
Too sloppy for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other way to say that. And again, I say that with the caveat that he's, a young player who this is his first year, breaking camp with a Major League Baseball team. He's being asked to play several positions while also making adjustments on offense. So he's got a lot on his plate. So this isn't like an attempt to dog David Bote, but he's been a little sloppy in the field. He's messed up some double plays where, the Cubs are only able to get one out because he, bobbles the ball or just doesn't get that transfer out quick enough. He's made some ill-advised throws. I think the Cubs as a team need to have like an eat it meeting. Like something on certain plays, guys.
Way too much.
Yeah, just eat it. Just stop throwing the ball. His offensive numbers are pretty, his WRC plus is 96, so, close to league average. He's got a nice on base percentage, almost 100 points higher than his batting average, which is 239, 326 on base, 407 slugging in this series. Like I mentioned, he gets his fourth home run. So there's some good things there. And he's, again, still adjusting to being an everyday player. But, his offense he's been in a bit of a slump. I think he's, been, prior to that home run especially, one of the literal worst hitters in baseball in the month of May. So, that's something to keep an eye on. And then, of course, you have Addison Russell, who's back up with the team. And I think that he likely gives you the best defense. Obviously he's spent most of his career playing shortstop, but the Cubs have been pretty definitive that Javi Baez, as he should be, is the shortstop of this team, and that is not going to change. But he should likely give you the best defense at second base. But as we've talked about many times, he has yet to show that he is a league average or better hitter in Major League Baseball. He has not done that in his career. And even in 2016, when he hits 21 home runs and drives in 95 runs, he still, his overall offensive numbers, WRC plus 95, 238 batting average in that year. So yeah, he was driving runs in and cashing in those opportunities, but the overall scope of his offense still rated below league average. And since 2018, it's been even worse than that. And, you know, he looks like someone that hasn't made those adjustments and doesn't necessarily seem like he's close to. So I've rambled on kind of setting the stage for this particular conundrum that the Cubs have. And again, this is all with the knowledge that Ben Zobrist is dealing with stuff in his personal life, and there is no timetable on that. He could be back in a week. He could never play baseball again. I have no idea. I would be speculating in the truest sense of the word if I said I had any guess or impression on what that's going to be. So, you know, for now, you have to operate that he's not on the team, and we'll change that when he decides, you know, if he's ready to come back. So what do you think that the Cubs should be doing with this, this spot? And again, it's not limited to second base because you can move several of these guys around, but that's really the position group where you need somebody to step up and kind of say, you know, this playing time is mine. I'm going to stake my claim, and I need to be the one out there on an everyday basis.
Well, it's hard because at the same time you want to find the right person by playing them and mixing them around and playing the matchups. At the same time, you know someone like David Bote needs to play consistently to adjust and see pitches on a daily basis because he's so young. And the same thing can be said about Russell as well. So it's hard. It's really difficult. And for someone like Descalso, the first few weeks, we were excited about what he was doing. He was doing almost the same thing you're used to seeing Zobrist do. Go up there, take pitches, work at bats. He has not been the same guy since those first 2 weeks. And just looking at his last 50 plate appearances, this is bad, Corey. Like these numbers are brutally bad. You ready for this? He has a 111 batting average, 1 home run. That's it. That's the only extra base he's had in his last 50 plate appearances. Only 5 base hits too. His WOBA is 154. His WRC plus is negative 11. League average is 100. I don't even know how to do the math on that. He's negative. he's negative 11 on that.
You're going to want to at least be in the positives. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I can at least interpret it. But I have no idea how to interpret that one. Anyway, so I don't know what the solution is. Selfishly, I want to see Bote get more chances. At the same time, I understand the value that someone like Descalso has because he has that innate plate discipline approach. So I really have no idea. I think you're going to have to just keep playing these guys and sacrifice the consistent playing time in hopes that someone can take charge and get that role. I just don't see any other logical solution to start right now. If there's any silver lining, I think Bote having that home run in the second game was good to see, but he came back in on Sunday Night Baseball and he had a terrible at-bat in his last at-bat of the game where he's just flailing at like cutters with half a swing. He's just out there confused. So it's difficult, Corey. It really is. I mean, I can tell you with confidence I don't want to see Addison Russell there just because I'm not feeling it. I just want to see more with Bote and his power potential and the improved discipline we saw earlier on in the season. If there's anything I want to see is him getting more playing time, but I know that may not make the most sense right now.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting spot and a tough one. And you know, this is kind of the deal. We've seen it over the years at different positions at times, admittedly. But, you know, this is kind of not an unfamiliar spot for the Cubs to kind of be trying to balance a few different players and try to get them going at the same time, try to figure out, you know, who should be getting the lion's share of that playing time. And, yeah, I think that you have some very different they're three very different scenarios. And admittedly, I've kind of been surprised at how little Russell has been getting out there since coming back. I was sort of expecting that once they brought him up, that, once they had committed to that, they would get him out there on a fairly regular basis. But he's not really starting as much as I was necessarily thinking that he would.
I'm fine with that, though. I think
sure,
that's the right,
yeah, because again,
move.
and part the thing with Russell from a baseball perspective is that you have to acknowledge at some point that it's not coming together at the plate.
It's looking worse than it ever has.
Yeah, and look, he's had pretty regular playing time since 2015. The 2015 and 2016, he gets over 500 plate appearances, almost 600 in 2016, 385 in 2017, 465 in 2018. So this isn't like a small sample for this guy. This is 4, pretty full years of playing and getting that sample. And, unfortunately, just like the overall scope of his offense has only really gotten worse. Again, just to look at, some of the advanced numbers, like his WOBA in 2016 was 316 with a 95 WRC plus, so just barely under league average. 2017, it was a 305 WOBA and an 85 WRC plus. And in 2018, it was a 290 WOBA and an 80 WRC plus. So really just getting progressively worse. And I think at some point, and that's kind of juxtaposed with Bote, where you would say, this guy's young. He doesn't have a lot of experience in the majors. He certainly doesn't have a lot of experience, getting regular starting time. So maybe you're a little more preferential to him because you're still hoping he can hit that upside. Whereas, look, Russell's only 24, but at some point you have to call a spade and just say, I'm not sure this guy's offense is going to come around. And if you guys have been listening to this podcast for years, you know that Brendan and I both were big believers in the potential of Addison Russell as a baseball player and that hitting would eventually come around. But I think you and I, Brendan, have even been off this train for a while. It's just it's too much of the, okay, I think it looks good, this is finally going to happen, and it ultimately does not. And you just have to admit, I'm not sure that this is ever going to come together in the way that we and people thought when he was the second best prospect in baseball coming up through the A's and then the Cubs system. So yeah, it's a tough spot. And then again, you compare that to Descalso, who's different than even the two of them in, he's the veteran, he's, maybe the more disciplined, and, you can kind of look to him to be more comfortable and confident at the plate. So, but again, he's also struggling worse at the plate far than either of these two right now in terms of his overall numbers on the season. And he's a markedly worse defender, just worse range and everything than Russell and Bote. And as we were joking about in our Cubs Insider chat, Brendan, Descalso is light years ahead of what we saw from Daniel Murphy in the 2018 season, who is, basically
the worst you ever see.
Wearing cement shoes out there, kind of immobile, like a statue. So he's a step above that, but it's still a step down, in terms of the defense, and so it's an interesting spot. And and again, I think you're right that the answer is to keep mixing and matching these guys, and if somebody's able to get hot, you kind of ride that hot hand and hope that they're able to, keep that going and turn it into a season-long thing. But that's all to say, this is, of all things, Brendan, right? This is definitely a first world problem, I think, for the Cubs to have. The lineup is rarely going to be perfect for any team. So I think we're just breaking this down because this is, to me right now, really the only spot and kind of group of players where trying to figure out what to do. Again, Hayward's been in a slump, but he's earned his playing time. He's improved as the years have gone on as a Cub. And, he's going to be out there. He deserves to be out there. Almora's on a hot streak. He's making great plays on defense. He's hitting home runs. Now, what does he have? 2 home runs this week? That's certainly got to be a record for him. He's not really a power hitter. So, yeah, and if he can start to drive the ball on a line, put it in the air more, it'll be a big success for him. Schwarber's getting on base. He's, making strides on offense, putting together better numbers. So I think that's why we focus on this group, because I think that's really the only place where you are asking questions right now and saying, what should they be doing? Who should be out there every day? And, how should Joe be handling this? That is not the only area of question on the team, Brendan, because
waiting for it. Yeah.
Yeah, this bullpen is considering
it's an issue.
Yeah, coming home to roost, basically. And I think that the key with the bullpen is they were not ever going to be as bad as they were in that first stretch, because that was like absurdly bad. But I think on maybe 2 episodes ago, I read a stat from Brett from Bleacher Nation where he pointed out that, since that Carl Edwards send down day, which I think was around April 7th at the end of that Brewers series, the Cubs bullpen has literally been number 1 in the league. And I think they're somewhere in between that, Brendan, is kind of the point. I don't
even
think they're the worst.
With Strop out, though, too.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think they're the worst bullpen in the league, but there's no way that this group was going to be the best. We're seeing Kinsler, giving up runs kind of on regular appearances now. He's coming back to earth a little bit. They are, using Cishek as much as they possibly can, and he's looked great, after I think 1 or 2 bad outings to start the year. He's himself, and he's going to be very good until his arm literally falls off. But Carl is, kind of Carl, I guess. He had those good outings when he first came up from AAA, but hasn't necessarily looked great since. And, you're kind of mixing and matching these things. We were following the rehab of Xavier Cedeno, but he hasn't looked very good since he's come up, and, Joe's been trying to get him in games. So it's an interesting spot. We always kind of knew that this bullpen was built on shaky ground, but it feels particularly dicey lately, Brendan. So and again, I think that you're just hoping that they can survive and get through until Strop comes back, which is hopefully a couple weeks here, something along those lines. And then ultimately until the deadline, and you're almost assuredly going to have to bring in some reinforcements. But any just general thoughts on the bullpen? What did you think about Cishek staying out there? Did you think it was the right move to stick with the guy you can trust the most, or are they really getting in danger here of kind of his arm literally falling off in one of these outings?
Well, the good thing is his pitch count wasn't insanely high when he finished the game. I think it was just under 30 pitches, so that's okay. But you have to be a little bit concerned that Joe Maddon's doing this on May 19th. This is like a NLDS type decision right here, to have your closer go in for a 3rd inning. So it's disconcerting, but at the same time, who else do you want out there? They're going back to the bullpen. You have Brock in there. You have Kyle Ryan, who's been pretty bad recently, even though we're still optimistic about him. But even then, can you rely on Kyle Ryan as your high leverage guy?
Right.
Probably not. He's been good. I still really like him, but to put him in that position, it doesn't necessarily make the most sense for a potential 100-win team. So I understood what Joe Maddon. I dislike it to the sense that was his only option. I get what he's doing.
Yeah.
And to some degree, I really like the decision because it does show a higher sense of urgency. I'm not sure we would have seen that last year, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So if this is any example of, hey, the Cubs are showing more urgency on getaway day, here you go. Here's Steve Cishek going 3 innings. But I am concerned if this keeps continuing, what the consequences are come September. Cishek last September was terrible. His walk rate was almost 6 batters per 9 innings, Corey, in September last year. So I'm not really happy with how this went. It's the right decision because the bullpen is so incompetent right now. And something's got to be addressed. Maybe not necessarily by tomorrow, but if this is happening 4 weeks from now, we got an issue, Corey. So I think everyone's aware of the situation. They've already been connected to Ken Giles. There were reports by both Toronto and then Bruce Levine actually confirmed those, that the Cubs have asked Toronto about Ken Giles, who you may remember was one of the focal pieces in the Houston Astros trade with the Philadelphia Phillies. So he has not been good recently, but this year he's been very good, but still has a history of essentially not looking or expecting what you wanted to see from your closer. So he's not necessarily a sure thing to that degree, but still pretty good. But regardless of Ken Giles, he's not the only solution either. They need more depth from top to bottom.
Yeah.
They can't just rely on Steve Cishek going out there. When Strop comes back, having Strop go out there. They need more than 2 or 3 guys. They got to have more depth somehow, and that's my concern. But come September, the bullpen's going to be different. Like at this point, you just have to expect that.
Yeah, and I think this bullpen has a lot of pieces who would make up a really successful bullpen. But I think a lot of these guys are slotted, maybe 1 or 2 spots too high in terms of the leverage that they're asked to pick up. And so I think that if Strop comes back and he's healthy and you can calm the usage of Steve Cishek down so that we can count on him for the whole year, I think you need like probably 2-ish high leverage guys. And I would like to see some more velocity injected into this bullpen. They have a lot of guys who don't throw very hard. And again, I think that guys like Kinsler, guys like Edwards, guys like Brock, like if they were pushed down a little bit in this bullpen, I think you would really feel very confident if those high leverage innings were going to Strop, Cishek, and, probably 1 or 2 outside guys. I would love, if it was someone like Dylan Maples, but, we've tried this before, right?
Yeah, but yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying, I think if you can slot some of these guys down, you've got the pieces to put together a really deep and good bullpen. Like I think if Kinsler is someone who is coming in like the 6th inning or, in clean spots like that, like I think you feel pretty good about that. But with the way this bullpen has been structured, you're asking him to be a top end reliever with some of these situations he's asked to get into. And he certainly wasn't that for the Cubs last year, and he was very good at the beginning of the year. And I was on board with, hey, look, he's earned more of those chances. But, now he's coming back to earth a little bit. He's getting taken deep pretty regularly in these last few outings here. And, that's not good for a guy who's supposed to be a ground ball specialist. So, that's just kind of the reality. So, yeah, I think it's something that they're going to have to address. I think that they know that. And, look, we're pretty close, right? Like to the trade deadline area, or at least just to the part of the season where some of these teams start to accept the fact that they're not going to be very good and they're not going to be in contention here. So you can kind of start, Theo and Jed can kind of start having those conversations. You can start sending your scouts out to see who might be available, etc. And I think that they have a lot of pieces to make this a successful bullpen, but I think they definitely need a couple big ones. I want to say one thing real quick as it relates to the bullpen before you preview this Philly series, and I just want to say I commend Joe Maddon for attempting to stand up for Carl Edwards in this situation with Sean Doolittle. I think it got blown way out of proportion, and I don't want to turn it into a thing, but I absolutely respect Joe Maddon noticing that he had, kind of is his foot touching a second time delivery. And I respect very much that Joe was going to go out there, and if he was going to get ejected, fine. If he hears from the MLB, fine. But basically just saying, it's not the same delivery, but I was told the foot can't touch twice. You guys got to figure out your rule, because to me, it looks like he's breaking the same rule, even if the deliveries are pretty different and Carl's was, much more noticeable. But that's one of those things that I think speaks a lot to why the players like Joe so much and why he's able to cultivate such a good clubhouse culture and environment with the teams that he manages, because he's not just going to sit there while his player gets policed on a rule and it seems ambiguous for everybody else. It's like, no, you're like, damn right, I'm going to head out there and ask you guys to explain this. Like, either clear it up, explain the rule, and enforce it the right way, or you're going to hear from me. And I think that that's absolutely what Joe should have done in that situation. And for a guy who might be traded at the deadline, Brendan, I think Sean Doolittle should
He's got to watch it there. Yeah,
I would watch my mouth a little bit. Like the jab at Joe about him needing to prove how smart he is it's too far. Joe didn't say anything about Sean Doolittle. He didn't do anything, to him personally. He just happened to be the pitcher on the mound when this protest takes place. Like, that's you're a victim of circumstance there, Sean. But, I don't know why you go to the media and say something like that. And I think I definitely am going to be that person that is just very quickly going to point out, if you want to talk about his intelligence, Sean, his intelligence has gotten him to the World Series twice as a manager. He's been to the NLCS a few times here with the Cubs, and he's won a World Series. And you play for a team right now, Sean, that hasn't ever won a playoff series. So I just think if you're going to go after Joe Maddon, I'm definitely going to. I disagree with Joe's decisions all the time, but don't come at our manager, man. Or we're going to clap back, right? I don't want to hear it. Don't be mouthing off about Joe Maddon. Come on,
ridiculous. Okay, so the time has come, Corey. It is time.
Man.
I know.
Monday night, baby.
My palms are sweaty doing this. Okay, let's just get into it. So the Cubs have a 4-game series upcoming with the Philadelphia Phillies. And by the way, you can get tickets to this series through SeatGeek with millions of live event tickets and a price match guarantee. SeatGeek proves there is a better way. Search sports, live music, comedy, and more. SeatGeek has the tickets you're looking for all in one place. Why is SeatGeek better than the rest? Well, a quick look at the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. How's that for customer satisfaction? SeatGeek breaks down the details. Green dots mean good deals. Red dots are overpriced in their interactive, very easy-to-use seat map. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. You guys know I always use SeatGeek to buy my baseball tickets, even basketball tickets, hockey tickets, concert tickets, whatever I want to go to. I use SeatGeek. It takes me about 5 minutes to go on my phone. I can get tickets from my friends. It's very easy to use, and I know I'm getting the best deal possible. Best of all, our listeners, you guys get $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app and use promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code CubsRelated for $10 off your first purchase. Okay. Monday night, here we go. 7:05 p.m. Central will be the start time. Yu Darvish will be taking the mound with a 2-3 record, a 5.14 ERA. I'm going slower because I'm seeing Jake Arrieta's name pop up right here. Jake Arrieta, guys, makes his return back to Wrigley Field for the first time to play. He was there last year, just did not have a spot in the rotation come up. Arrieta this year is 4-4 with a 4.02 ERA. I am expecting some type of video like he had last year, but this time maybe a little bit more different given that he is pitching. But look, this guy is a legend. He will forever go down in Chicago Cubs history. He's part of that culture change. He deserves every ovation he gets. So that will be fun. The converse opponent over there with Darvish will be interesting to follow. I'll leave it at that. On Tuesday, the start time for that will be 6:05 p.m. Central Time, a little bit earlier for you guys used to the 7:05 p.m. start times because it is once again on ESPN. Zach Eflin will take the mound for Philadelphia with a 5-4 record, a 2.89 ERA. Jose Quintana will be his opponent. 4-3 with a 3.68 ERA. And then on Wednesday, the Cubs will be right back at it at a night game again, this time at 7:05 p.m. Central Time. They'll have Cole Irvin, who's 2-0 with a 2.77 ERA. He'll face up against another Cole Hamels, who's 4-0 with a 3.13 ERA. And then to finish off this 4-game set, Aaron Nola for the Phillies will take the mound, who's 4-0 with a 4.47 ERA on the year. He'll be facing your boy, John Lester, who is 3-2 with a 2.09 ERA. So even though he had that one poor start, he still is in the top tier for your ERA leaders. And that is that. The Phillies are 27-19. The Cubs are 27-17. As it stands Monday morning, the Cubs are your first place NL Central leaders, up 1.5 games over Milwaukee, who's 28-21. The Cubs are 3 games up of Pittsburgh, who's 24-20, and the Cardinals are really slipping here. They're 24-23, 4.5 games back.
Hate to see that, don't you?
Hate
Brendan?
to see it.
What
oh
a
my
shame.
gosh, what a shame, man. And the Reds are 21-26. They're 7.5 games back. The Cubs right now have the second best record in the National League. They are behind the Dodgers, who are 31-17. Cody Bellinger continues to go off. That's what's going on over there. So, Corey, there's a lot of narratives this upcoming series. You have to just shift your focus to that Monday night game right away. And if you want to get a little bit more, nitty gritty for the Cubs details specifically, seeing how Cishek is used after that 2-inning and 1/3 performance, you have to imagine he won't be available for Monday, maybe not even Tuesday. I mean, that's a very lengthy performance from him. So we'll see how that goes. Anything that you're paying close attention to?
Well, I think this should be a fun series. I think, you get a first-place team in the Phillies, who are atop the NL East at the moment by a couple games on the Braves. Obviously, the Cubs are in first place, and, I think that's, for all of us, kind of just the most, when baseball's at its most fun. You get closer to summer here. I know the weather still is a little iffy in Chicago, but, you get that summer-type baseball in Chicago at Wrigley Field, 2 first-place teams, 4-game set. Like, it doesn't really get better than that, and this one obviously comes with... It's a storyline-lated series here, Brendan. There's really no other way to put that. The pitching matchup on Monday is, amusing. It's almost too amusing. It's like scripted,
that's one way of
right?
It.
So that'll, certainly be something. I think, typically the joke with stuff like that is whoever wins that game won that off season, and got that decision right. If the Cubs win, then you was the right choice and Jake was the wrong choice, etc. Obviously, it's not that simple, but it will certainly be written about by people like it is that simple. And then you have Bryce Harper coming to Chicago, and the Cubs seemingly were not ever really seriously involved in this process in this offseason. But whether they were or not, we're still not exactly 100% sure about. It's kind of a secret at this point. But, I think the mutual interest was there regardless of whether the process ever actually got that serious. We know that Bryce loves playing at Wrigley Field. That's why, this whole thing spiraled out of control in the first place. And I think regardless of whether they had the money or they felt it was the right move, I'm sure the Cubs brass was at least moderately interested in Bryce Harper patrolling an outfield spot for the Chicago Cubs. So, you kind of bring all that together, and with both teams in first place, makes it kind of the best way for these storylines to go head to head. If the Phillies were in the tank at the bottom of the NL East, it doesn't make that Arrieta-Darvish matchup quite as much fun. But, now it's like pretty serious because both of these teams are trying to stay atop their division. They're trying to stave off some competitive teams that are behind them. So, other than that, no, I mean, those are, kind of the storyline notes. And, like we talked about, I'll be curious to see, who's getting that playing time on the middle infield. Javi leaves the game on Sunday night. I think, what did you say, a bruise on his ankle?
The official diagnosis is a heel contusion, which is a heel bruise.
Yeah, so he's fine, but, I don't know if the Cubs will give him a day off or something like that and try Russell over there at short and maybe Bote at second. But, again, that's, I think, the group to watch. So interesting to see who gets that playing time. Are any of them kind of able to break out of their slumps there? And just keeping things going. Again, like, this team is playing well, so I don't have any, like, specific things I need to see them doing. Here's what I would like to see. I want one of those 4 guys in the middle of the order to hit a home run, and then for the 4 of them to kind of like compete with each other to see how close they can stay. So I think that's just how they should go.
One home run.
Yeah, if Chris homers on Monday, then I think Anthony, Javi, and Wilson need to take it upon themselves. Like, all right, he got to 12, we got to keep up. So we just got to keep hitting home runs. I think is the best strategy.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah, just keep hitting home runs.
Let's do that. Yeah, that's the right way to do it.
But, look, you read it. Like, they're a game and a half up on Milwaukee, but they're 4 ahead in the loss column. They're 6 games ahead of the Cardinals in the loss column, even though they're 4.5 back. 3 ahead of Pittsburgh. That's even. They played the same number of games. So they're in a good position. And I think, they if you can play close to 500, a little bit above, on the road, and TCB at home, that's a recipe for a really good season. And that's pretty much what we've seen the Cubs do throughout this 2019 season. So I say, just keep things rolling here. And look, I desperately want you to outduel Jake tomorrow. I think that is just something that would be so good, and you would feel so good for him in that. And he as he said after his last start, like, he's still looking for that, like, Wrigley Field good big performance, and I think there would be no better time to do it than against Jake Arrieta. And I would also, I like the idea of particularly Rizzo, because I think those guys were pretty close. But Rizzo taking Arrieta deep, I think, the reaction to that might be pretty funny. But just, go out, take 3 or 4, and we'll keep things rolling here.
That's all it comes down to. If you're going to that game, please get off your seat, give Arrieta a standing ovation. What he did was insane. Even that 15 second half, that was the best stretch of baseball from a pitcher I think I may ever witness in a Cubs uniform. Nothing against the current iteration of these Cubs pitchers, but that was historically great what Arrieta did. So if you're there, get off your seat, give him a standing ovation. He was a huge part of why the Cubs were what they were, even going back to 2016 and 2017. He was a staple. So just, make all us Cubs fans look good and give the man what he deserves.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I would certainly hope, and I don't think that most Cubs fans need to even be reminded of that. So I think it'll be a very nice moment. And I would hope that somebody slips into that scouting report. Don't forget, you cannot sleep on that man at the plate. Don't make a mistake to Jake Arrieta. We've seen, unfortunately, we've seen you have some struggles with command, even against the bottom of lineups and opposing pitchers. And we all know Jake is not the one to mess around with. So
he's going to go yard tomorrow.
He wants to for sure. Right. Yeah. So Jake is going to be swinging like Javi swings, in a tie game in the bottom of the 9th inning. Like, he's going for one thing and one thing only, and that is to send one on to Waveland. Yeah. So. Anyway, I think that's all we have for you. A good series from the Cubs, and they managed to get through this stretch against some really good pitchers, come out of it with a 500 road trip, head back home, still a game and a half in first place. So still just a very good spot for this team, who I still think has that extra gear to get to, and I don't think we've seen the Cubs play their best baseball of the whole season. So. It's a good time to be a Cubs fan still, and this series with Phillies should be fun. So, as always, we will come to you after the Cubs and Phillies finish on Thursday. We thank you guys very much for joining us. As always, Brendan is at Cubs Related on Twitter. I am at CF Cubs Related. At Cubs Related is our Instagram, and you can find both of us at Real Cubs Insider, are the social media handles, and, of course, CubsInsider.com. As always, we thank you guys very much for listening. And go Cubs.